There are a few moments in your life you can mark as the exact second everything changes. For me, it happened on a quiet Thursday evening, just after 7 p.m. I was halfway through reading an article on rising interest rates, typical after-dinner routine stuff, when Alyssa walked into the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood like a metronome counting down to disaster. She looked breathtaking, and she knew it. The black satin gown hugged every inch of her like it had been poured on her in liquid form. The deep V-neckline revealed a hint of the curve of her breasts I'd once buried my face in, kissed, worshipped. Her makeup was sultry and sharp, her hair swept to one side with an elegance that felt more weapon than style. I sat up straighter, my brow furrowed. "Where are you going?" I asked, already dreading the answer. She didn't meet my eyes as she put in a single diamond earring. "Charity Gala. The one at the Wilshire Grand." My heart sank. "I didn't know you RSVP'd. You didn't even mention it." She shrugged, finally looking at me. "You've been so busy lately. I figured you'd pass. Besides," and here it came, "I'm going with someone who actually notices me." I blinked. "Excuse me." Her lips curled into a smirk. "Zane. My trainer." Silence detonated in the room like a landmine. The kind that doesn't leave shrapnel. Just craters. Zane. Of course. Tall. Tatted. The kind of guy who probably had a dozen unsolicited gym thirst traps in his phone, ready to fire off. I'd noticed the extra sessions. The new yoga pants. The way she'd begun to glow, not with fitness, but with that look you get when someone flirts with you just hard enough to make you feel wanted. "I thought you said he was gay," I said, voice low. Alyssa actually laughed. "Bi. Or maybe straight when it suits him. I guess tonight, it suits him." It felt like someone had shoved a fist into my gut and twisted. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of flinching. "You're serious?" I asked, eyes locked to hers. I tried to read her expression, find some trace of guilt, shame, hell, even hesitation. Instead, I saw something far worse. Enjoyment. "I'm still young, Ryan," she said, running her hands down her sides like a model adjusting a gown. "And I deserve to be admired. You used to look at me like I was the only woman in the room. Now," she paused, "you look at me like I'm furniture." That one stung. Because she wasn't entirely wrong. But not because I didn't care, because life had consumed me. Work. Bills. Mortgage. But when had we stopped touching each other in the hallway? When had sex turned into routine? When had compliments turned into nods? I stood up, trying to steady myself. "Alyssa, don't," she said, waving a manicured hand at me. "This isn't a fight. It's just honesty. I told you, I'm not asking for permission. I'm just letting you know." Then she turned and walked to the front door, heels echoing off the walls. As she opened it, a gust of cold air blew in. She didn't even look back when she added, "Oh, and don't wait up." The door clicked shut behind her, and I stood there, alone, reeling. The scent of her perfume lingered in the air, jasmine and danger. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just stood, the words, "someone who actually notices me," echoing like a curse in my head. That was the night my marriage changed. And I decided, if she wanted to play games, I could play too. But not with desperation. With precision. With control. With fire. This wasn't the end. No. It was the beginning. I didn't move from that spot for what felt like an hour. The echo of her heels, that dismissive smirk, her perfume, everything about her exit was etched into my brain like a scar being burned into flesh. I stood there in the half-light of our living room, still hearing her voice in my head. "I'm going with someone who actually notices me." Alyssa hadn't just left the house tonight. She'd left our marriage in pieces behind her, and she did it with a smile. I eventually poured myself a drink. Something dark, aged, and brutal. The kind of drink that doesn't ask questions, just numbs the ones already screaming in your head. I sipped slowly at first, letting the burn slide down my throat. Then I drank faster. I wasn't heartbroken. Not yet. What I felt was deeper than sadness, more corrosive. Something between humiliation and fury. The worst part? She knew what she was doing. That wasn't a cry for help. That wasn't a woman lashing out for attention. That was a fucking performance. She wanted me to feel small. Wanted me to picture them dancing together under chandeliers, her laughing at his stupid gym jokes, his hand too low on her back. The little glances. The whispered compliments. The possibility that by midnight, they'd be in a hotel room, her gown around her ankles, his mouth on her body, the same body I used to know like my own. And now? It felt like that knowledge had been revoked, overwritten. I stared at the empty glass and poured another. Alyssa always craved an audience. She lived for the spotlight. But what stung more than anything was the truth wrapped inside her cruelty. I'm still young, and I deserve to be admired. Had I stopped admiring her? Maybe I had. I remembered when we first met. She'd worn this low-cut navy sundress that clung to her curves like it was made for her. She was flirtatious, magnetic, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and instantly pull all the air toward her. I was obsessed. Couldn't keep my hands off her. We had sex everywhere, in the car, in the kitchen, in hotel rooms booked just for a midday rendezvous. She made me feel like a king back then, and I made her feel like a goddess. But years had passed. I got buried in work. She got buried in self-care. Our touches became perfunctory. Sex, when it happened, felt like a favor, not a hunger. I didn't stop loving her, but maybe I stopped noticing her the way I used to. But she didn't talk to me about it. She ran straight into the arms of Zane. That grinning, shirtless gym punk with abs sculpted for Instagram and the IQ of a protein bar. He was everything I wasn't. Carefree, young, full of that fake confidence people mistake for charm. I bet he tells her she's sexy. I bet he makes her feel like she's the hottest woman alive. Maybe he even believes it. I poured one more drink. My last for the night. This wasn't about jealousy anymore. Not entirely. This was about power, control, dignity. She wanted to make a statement. Well, I heard it loud and clear. Now it was my turn. But I wouldn't lower myself to some petty confrontation. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't cry. And I sure as hell wouldn't sit at home while she played arm candy to a guy who probably had to Google what a Roth IRA was. I needed a plan. Not revenge. Not yet. Something surgical. I opened my laptop and started searching. High-end event escorts. Not prostitutes. I wasn't looking for sex. I was looking for a weapon. Someone elegant. Mysterious. The kind of woman who could make Alyssa question everything she thought she knew about me. I wasn't going to roll over and let her have the last word. She wanted admiration? I'd give her something to really admire. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find someone who reminded me of what it felt like to be seen. Not as the man who forgot to notice her, but as the man she should have never underestimated in the first place. By morning, my hangover was a dull throb behind my eyes, but my purpose had never been clearer. I wasn't going to sit around and watch Alyssa torch our marriage while I sipped whiskey and felt sorry for myself. If she wanted to play games, I'd bring a damn chessboard. And I'd bring a queen who could burn her illusions to ash with a single look. So I made the call. Echelon companions. How may I assist you today? Her voice was cool, professional, like silk draped over steel. Not flirtatious. Not fake. It had the kind of polish that let you know you weren't dealing with some seedy backroom operation. This was high-end. Confidential. The kind of place men like me didn't call unless we were on the edge of something: loss, reinvention, revenge. I cleared my throat. I need a companion for a formal event. A gala. Of course, Mr. Ryan. Just Ryan for now. A pause, then a low hum of understanding. And what exactly are you looking for in your companion? I paused, considering my words. She needs to be striking. Classy. She has to hold her own in a room full of billionaires and social climbers. Intelligent. Confident. Someone who walks in and owns the room without saying a word. And you don't want anything beyond that? No. This isn't about sex. It's about presence. Another pause. Longer this time. I have someone in mind, she said finally. Her name is Natalie. Natalie. Even the name had weight to it. I'll send over her portfolio. If you're satisfied, we can arrange a meeting. 10 minutes later, I was staring at her photos and bio. Her face was angular and elegant, all sharp cheekbones and icy eyes that seemed to dare the camera to look away. Her hair was dark, straight, tucked behind one ear with the kind of carelessness that only came from confidence. She looked like she'd walked out of a Bond film and made you forget who James even was. A former fashion consultant. Spoke 3 languages. Traveled the world. 6 feet tall in heels. And those legs, goddamn. The way she carried herself in every picture, legs crossed just so, one eyebrow arched slightly, like she knew things you didn't and might tell you if you were interesting enough. She wasn't beautiful in the same way Alyssa was. No, she was dangerous. I replied with a simple, yes. Her. The agency set up a meeting later that evening at an upscale bar downtown. Quiet. Discreet. Somewhere that didn't scream transaction, but whispered possibility. I got there early and ordered a bourbon, trying not to feel ridiculous. I'd never done anything like this. My collar felt too tight. I kept adjusting my cufflinks, even though I never wore cufflinks unless it was tax season. Then the door opened. And in walked Natalie. Heads turned. Conversations paused. She wore a black dress so perfectly tailored it could have been stitched on her in the back of a Rolls-Royce. Her heels clicked like punctuation, and when her eyes met mine, I felt it, that shift. The one Alyssa used to give me before sex, where your breath catches because you realize you're not just looking at someone, you're seen. She walked over and slid into the booth across from me without breaking eye contact. "Ryan," she said, her voice low, smooth as red wine on velvet. "You clean up well." I smirked. "You've seen me before?" "No. But you don't look like a man who calls places like this often. And yet here you are. I guess heartbreak makes you do strange things." That earned the smallest flicker of amusement in her eyes. "I read your request. Formal gala. Stuffy people. High-stakes egos. And a certain woman you want to rattle. Tell me about her." I hesitated, then nodded. "Alyssa. My wife. Ex. Not yet." Natalie raised an eyebrow. "That's bold. She's going to this gala with her trainer. Some 20-something with abs and no ambition. She wanted to show me she still has it. I want to show her she never deserved to." Natalie stirred her drink slowly, then leaned forward just enough to let her perfume hit me, something rich and heady and utterly feminine. "And you picked me because you want to remind her what a real woman looks like on a man's arm." I nodded, slow. "Exactly." She sat back, lips curving. "Well, you're in luck." "Why?" She sipped her wine, then set the glass down gently. "Because I know Zane." That made me freeze. "You what?" Natalie tilted her head. "Zane? Tattooed, cocky, thinks his biceps are a personality trait?" "Yeah, I know him." "How?" A long pause. Then, with a smirk that promised absolute chaos, she said, "He's my ex-husband." I laughed, once, sharp and disbelieving. "You're joking." "Oh, I never joke about ex-husbands," she said. "Especially the ones who trade you in for a younger lifestyle." He said that, by the way. Younger lifestyle. Like I was expired milk. We both sat there for a moment, the irony heavy between us. She leaned in, her voice suddenly low and intimate. "If you want to do more than make her jealous, if you want to shatter her illusion, I'm in. Not just as eye candy. As your partner in crime." I stared at her, heartbeat pulsing in my throat. This had started as a way to regain my pride. Now it was something else entirely. "Deal?" I said. We clinked glasses. And the real game began. After Natalie and I clinked glasses, something in her shifted. She wasn't just beautiful, she was now lethal. Not in a sinister way. No, this was something sharper. Precise. Like watching someone slowly draw a blade across velvet. Elegant, smooth, but you knew it could cut deep. "I'll be honest," she said, swirling her wine. "When I first saw your request, I almost passed on it." "Why?" She met my eyes. "Because I thought you were like every other guy who comes through that agency. Hurt ego. Looking to buy back his pride in the form of a woman he could never actually keep." But then, I saw the name. Zane. And suddenly, it wasn't just business anymore. She took a slow sip, then leaned forward on her elbows, her voice husky and steady. "Zane and I were married for 4 years. He was charming at first, dangerous, too, but in the way that made your stomach flutter and your panties drop." I raised an eyebrow. She smirked. "Don't worry, I'm not here to brag about him." That stage passed fast. Once he knew he had me, the mask came off. It started with late nights, then lies. Then, eventually, just raw disrespect. He said he felt caged, that he needed to feel alive again. Sound familiar? Natalie tilted her glass in my direction, toasting the cruel symmetry. "He left me," she continued, "for a woman who was younger, dumber, and exactly the type to inflate his fragile ego. I thought I was done with him. I glanced down at my drink, until he showed up on my wife's arm. And now," she said, eyes glittering, "the universe is giving me a second shot. You and I? We're not just evening the score, Ryan. We're flipping the board." She pulled out her phone, tapped something, and turned the screen toward me. A picture of Zane in tight dress pants and no shirt, grinning at himself in a gym mirror, captioned "King of Gains." I stared. "Oh yeah," she said dryly. "He's that guy." "I didn't realize I married a cliché," I muttered, shaking my head. "You didn't," she said. She just fell for one. The next 2 hours were a blur of planning. Natalie wasn't just a woman with an axe to grind. She was an artist with a scalpel. "First," she said, "you need a makeover." What? Hair. Suit. Posture. You don't need to become Zane. You need to become the man Alyssa imagined you used to be. The one who could have had anyone in that ballroom but chose her. I smirked. "You mean I need to become a fantasy?" "Exactly. But not just hers. Everyone's." She's going to walk in on the arm of a gym rat and think she's won. Until she sees you. With me. And realizes she brought a toy to a war. Natalie had a presence. Even seated, she looked like she owned the space around her. There was a tension between us now, something warm and flickering underneath all the sharp edges. Maybe it was the wine. Or the shared enemy. Or the fact that every time her leg brushed against mine, I felt a jolt like static down my spine. So what's our story? I asked, leaning back. People are going to ask questions. We were college sweethearts, she said without hesitation. We lost touch. Found each other again recently. The flame never really died. She arched an eyebrow. You okay playing the smitten role? I let out a slow exhale. I think I can manage. And she added, her voice dipping lower, we need to sell it physically. Close contact. Whispered jokes. Occasional touches that make her stomach twist. Alyssa needs to believe you've already tasted me and want more. My throat dried slightly. And have I? I asked, testing the water, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. Natalie held my gaze. That depends. Are you ready to play the part? We sat in the growing silence of the bar, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was plotting revenge anymore, or something else entirely. She leaned in. If you can't fake a little heat with me, Ryan, we've already lost. I could smell her perfume again, something exotic and expensive, clinging to the edges of my pulse. Oh, I can fake it, I said, my eyes tracing the edge of her jaw. The question is, can I stop myself from enjoying it? Natalie smiled then. Not smug. Not seductive. Something darker. Something knowing. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a plan. This was a game of control. Of power. Of fire. And for the first time since Alyssa walked out the door, I didn't feel weak. I felt dangerous. The next morning felt like waking up inside a different man. I stood in front of the full-length mirror at Natalie's recommendation, a boutique men's tailor off Melrose, the kind of place where a suit wasn't something you bought off a rack. It was sculpted around you like armor. The man staring back at me looked like someone I hadn't seen in years. Not since before marriage. Not since before the safe routines and overworked weeks blurred together into something bland and muted. The jacket hugged my shoulders perfectly, tapered at the waist to give me that sharp V shape. Midnight navy with a subtle sheen, double-vented, peak lapels, fucking regal. Paired with a crisp black shirt, no tie, top 2 buttons left undone just enough to suggest edge. I looked like I belonged in a room that Alyssa never imagined I could own. Natalie circled me like a predator surveying a kill. Better, she said, brushing a speck of lint from my lapel. You're not just dressing to impress. You're dressing to haunt her. Her fingers lingered just a second longer than necessary. You want her to stare at you all night and wonder how she lost you, she added, stepping back. You want her to feel it in her throat, in her gut. You want her to sweat. That sounds dramatic, I said. No, she replied. It sounds deserved. We spent the next 2 days together. Natalie became a full-time coach. Posture, voice, eye contact, the kind of body language that radiates cool detachment. She made me walk across rooms with her heels clicking behind me like a runway instructor. Own your space, she said. Don't shrink. Let them orbit you. She had me practice tilting my chin slightly down when I smiled, adds a hint of mystery, she said. Speak low and slow. Let silence make them lean in. And then there was the chemistry. God, the chemistry. We practiced it like choreography. Hand on her lower back. Whisper something in her ear that makes her laugh like it's our secret. Hold eye contact just a second too long. Not fake desire, controlled tension. A pressure that builds but never tips. But the thing was, sometimes, it didn't feel fake. When she laughed at my improv lines, really laughed, my chest tightened in that familiar, unwelcome way. When her hand grazed mine and lingered, I forgot to breathe. When she bit her lip, leaning close to adjust my collar, and I felt her breath brush my neck, I forgot we were rehearsing. One night, we were going over backstory at her place. She poured wine. We sat close, legs pressed together, her knee over mine like we were already lovers. She smelled like jasmine and danger. Her silk robe slid just off her shoulder, revealing skin I tried not to stare at. We met in college, she said softly, her voice warm with memory. You were studying finance. I was studying design. And we broke up because you moved to the city, got cold, closed off. I wanted more. And now? I asked. She held my gaze. Now I see what I missed. We didn't move for a long moment. The air grew thick, charged, humming with everything unspoken. I could have kissed her. I wanted to, but I didn't. Because this was still a game. A performance. and I wasn't about to blur the lines. At least, that's what I told myself. Tomorrow's the gala, she said finally, standing up and breaking the spell. You ready to make your wife question everything? I nodded slowly, still feeling the heat of her thigh pressed to mine. Good, she said. Because once those doors open, you're not Ryan the accountant. You're Ryan, the man who doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't settle. You're the man she wished she hadn't let go. She turned to walk down the hall. Her robe slipped just a little more off one shoulder. She looked back. Oh, she added, her voice barely above a whisper. And for what it's worth, if I were still your wife, I wouldn't have let you go in the first place. Then she disappeared into her room, and I sat there alone, heart pounding. This had started as a mission to make Alyssa regret everything. But somehow, somewhere between the suits, the coaching, and the games, something real had crept in, and I wasn't sure if I should fight it or let it burn. The valet took our car without a word, but not without a look. Natalie stepped out first, all legs and precision. Her dress was a deep emerald green, the kind of shade that turned heads without screaming for them. It hugged her frame like it was stitched by God himself. Off the shoulder, high slit, cinched waist. Her heels added another 3 inches of power. She didn't walk. She glided. I stepped out after her, straightened my jacket, and adjusted my cufflinks. Midnight navy tux. Polished shoes. Subtle but expensive watch. She slipped her arm through mine as we approached the entrance to the Wilshire Grand Ballroom. Her fingers light, her body warm against mine. You ready? She whispered, eyes scanning the crowd. As I'll ever be, I muttered. The gala was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers glowed above us like stars on steroids. Waiters drifted through the room with silver trays. Laughter rippled across the air like champagne fizzing in a flute. And there she was, Alyssa. She stood near the center of the ballroom, her back to us, head tilted in laughter. Her gown was gold, shimmering and slinky, slit just high enough to tempt without scandal. She looked stunning. And on her arm, Zane. His shirt strained against his chest, and his blazer looked like it came off a mannequin 3 sizes too small. He was grinning, leaning in close to whisper something in her ear. His hand was already resting low on her hip, thumb grazing her bare back. They looked smug, untouchable, until the room turned. Natalie and I stepped through the doors like a slow-motion drop of gasoline into a fire. Heads turned. Conversations died. Eyes widened. And then Alyssa turned. Her smile froze before it could fully form. Her body stiffened ever so slightly, just enough for me to see it. She scanned me, my suit, my posture, the absolute smoke show on my arm, and I watched something shift behind her eyes. Panic? Jealousy? Recognition? Maybe all 3. I didn't break eye contact. I let my gaze hold hers, calm and unreadable. I smiled, just enough to say yes, this is real. Yes, you should be worried. Natalie leaned in and whispered, her lips barely brushing my ear. She just bit her lip. Game on. We made our way through the room like royalty. People whispered. Some approached. Natalie charmed effortlessly, laughing, touching arms, playing the perfect, elegant +1. Every now and then, she'd rest her hand on my chest or brush invisible lint from my shoulder, each touch deliberate, casual, and absolutely calculated. Alyssa couldn't look away. And Zane? He noticed Natalie. Oh, he noticed. His jaw tightened the second he got a good look at her. His hand shifted on Alyssa's back. Then, when Natalie laughed a little too loud at something I said, his smile faltered. We circled toward them like a dance. It was bound to happen. This room wasn't big enough to hide in. When we finally crossed paths, it was Alyssa who broke first. Ryan, she said, her voice a little too high. I didn't expect to see you here. She looked me up and down like she couldn't decide if I was a ghost or a goddamn threat. Zane smiled tightly, trying to play it cool, but his posture screamed uncomfortable. I turned to her and nodded once. Alyssa, you look golden. That stung. I saw it in her eyes. And this must be. She hesitated, trying to regain footing. Natalie, my date said, offering a hand, cool and graceful. Ryan's everything. That made Zane blink. Alyssa looked like she'd swallowed her tongue. Natalie leaned in just enough to give the illusion of intimacy and added, I think we may have a mutual friend, actually. Oh, Zane asked, his voice cracking slightly. Natalie smiled. You look familiar. And just like that, the air thickened with invisible flames. We didn't stay long. just long enough to leave an impression burned so deeply into their brains they'd taste smoke for weeks. As we walked away, I felt Natalie's fingers squeeze my arm gently. "Well?" she asked. I glanced back one last time. Alyssa was watching us, not smiling, not laughing. And Zane? He looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "I think," I said slowly, "they've finally realized they're not the main characters anymore." Natalie smirked. "Good. Let them sit with that." And as the doors closed behind us, the whispers followed. But for the first time in a long time, they weren't about my wife. They were about me. The ballroom had returned to its golden murmur. The string quartet resumed its soft waltz, glasses clinked again, and servers floated through the sea of sequins and designer tuxes. But the ripples we caused didn't stop at the door. They spread quiet and cutting through every whispered conversation, every stolen glance. Alyssa might have been smiling, but her eyes betrayed her. She was unraveling. Zane stood stiffly beside her, his hand now awkwardly perched at his side instead of curled around her waist. He kept darting glances toward us, like a man realizing too late that he'd brought a pocket knife to a sniper duel. And Natalie? She was in her element. We moved from group to group with effortless charm. Natalie was magnetic, laughing at the right jokes, asking the right questions, remembering every name she heard. She leaned into me at all the right moments, touched my arm when she said my name, and told stories about our college days, like we were two lovers rediscovering something long buried. And she didn't miss a beat when she saw Alyssa watching us. She turned toward Zane with a slow, practiced grace and sauntered over, alone. I saw his expression change instantly, like a man recognizing the storm he once escaped now rising back on the horizon. "Natalie," he said, voice low, eyes flicking nervously toward Alyssa. "Zane," she purred. "Didn't think I'd see you outside of gym selfies and your recycled pickup lines." He chuckled nervously. "Still sharp as ever." "Sharper," she said, tilting her head. "You still using 'I train your glutes better than your husband can'? Or have you graduated to 'Do you even lift your own ego'?" He swallowed. Alyssa stepped closer, her smile frozen. "Ryan's looking good tonight," she offered, trying to redirect. Natalie turned, glanced at me, and smiled, soft, genuine, like she'd just remembered something intimate. He always looked good. Just needed the right woman to remind him. Ouch. I could feel the tension tightening across the room. Zane's face had gone pale beneath his bronze complexion. Alyssa's fingers twitched at her clutch. She didn't like this. Not one bit. Natalie leaned in closer to Zane now, dropping her voice to a whisper, just low enough for Alyssa to barely hear it. "You ever tell her, Zane," she said silkily, "how you cheated on me 6 times before you walked out? Or that I paid off your car because your gym clients were paying in other forms of currency?" Zane blinked. Alyssa turned her head sharply. "What did she say?" Zane stammered, his confidence starting to peel like old paint. She's exaggerating." Natalie always had a flair for drama. Natalie stepped back, hands raised. "Sure, sweetheart. Just a little drama." And then she turned and walked back to me like nothing happened, her hips swaying, her smile unbothered. "What was that?" I asked as she slid her hand into mine. "Just setting the stage," she said, letting her wonder what else she doesn't know about her dream boy. From across the room, I could see Alyssa tugging Zane aside, whispering furiously. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes darted. She was asking questions, and he was answering them all wrong. The cracks were forming. The fantasy was beginning to rot from the inside. Later, while sipping wine near the terrace, one of the board members of the hosting charity, a polished older man named Harrison who wore a tailored tux like a second skin, approached us. "Ryan," he said warmly, extending a hand. "You've been missed at these events. You look transformed." "New year, new outlook," I replied, nodding to Natalie. "She's been good for me." "I can see that," he said, eyes twinkling. "Well, you two are certainly the talk of the evening. Tell me, how long have you reconnected?" Natalie interjected, glancing at me. "A few months. But it feels like no time passed at all." Harrison smiled. "Rare thing, getting a second shot at the right person. Don't waste it." As he drifted off, I turned to her. "You're good at this." Natalie raised a brow. "Good at what?" "Being exactly what I need, before I even know I need it." She paused. For a moment, the mask dropped. Something soft flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe. Or something more dangerous. "You've always had it in you," she said quietly. "You just forgot." We stood there for a second longer than we should have, her fingers still tangled in mine. And behind us? Alyssa stood alone, arms crossed, face tight. Zane was nowhere to be seen. The band had just transitioned from string quartets to jazz standards when the real performance of the night began. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing with unraveling. It's slow, delicate, like a pull on a loose thread that starts small and ends with everything in tatters. I was at the bar, pretending to nurse a scotch while chatting with two executives from some private equity firm. Natalie was on the dance floor, swaying to the music with one of the event donors, a silver-haired gentleman whose hands stayed appropriately polite but whose eyes flicked down her neckline every chance he got. She played it beautifully. Just enough laughter, just enough closeness, and every few minutes, her eyes would flick to me, like I was the only one in the room who mattered. Alyssa saw every glance. And with Zane nowhere in sight, her gaze had grown tighter, sharper. She'd been circling the room like a ghost for the past 20 minutes, drink untouched, lips thin, eyes scanning. Then Natalie made her move. She excused herself from the donor and walked, floated, across the floor to where I stood. "May I steal my man?" she asked sweetly, interrupting the executive mid-sentence. "By all means," the man chuckled. Natalie slid her hand into mine and tugged me gently toward the dance floor. The second our bodies met, something changed. Her hand found my shoulder. My other hand slipped around her waist. Her eyes locked onto mine, and the music softened everything around us. "I found Zane," she murmured as we danced. "Oh." In the hallway. On his phone. Arguing with someone. Probably trying to explain why his past is suddenly catching up with him. "Did you say anything?" "Not yet," she said, smirking. "But I did give him a look. You know the one." "Oh, I've seen the one." She twirled under my arm, the green silk of her dress catching the light like wildfire, then came back to me, closer now. "Ready to end this?" she asked. I hesitated. "How?" She leaned in, her lips brushing my ear. "Like this." She turned her body, just enough to face a nearby cluster of Gala VIPs. Women in couture. Men with portfolios larger than some nations. Then she smiled, all radiant and dangerous, and said, a little louder than necessary. Zane always did like to brag about his clients. But he never mentioned he left me with 5 figures of debt and a cheating record that could stretch across counties. A laugh followed. Soft. Measured. But loud enough. A few heads turned. And just like that, a nearby woman, older, sharp cheekbones, probably one of Alyssa's charity committee peers, whispered, "Wait, did you say Zane?" Natalie turned to her and smiled with all the grace of a viper in pearls. "Zane Carter. Personal trainer. I'm his ex-wife." The woman blinked. "He's here tonight. With Alyssa Wilkins." Natalie's brow lifted. "Oh, is he?" She feigned surprise. "Well, that makes 3 overlaps." "Overlaps?" Natalie tilted her head. "Affairs. I think that's what the young people call them now." Gasps. Not loud, but pointed. And suddenly the music felt distant, like it was playing through water. I started turning toward Alyssa, still standing alone, still scanning, still clutching her glass like it was the only solid thing left in the room. And then Zane re-entered the ballroom. Natalie's voice sliced through the air, clear and sweet. "There he is. I always said he had a talent for showing up after the damage is done." Zane froze. Alyssa turned to him, her face pale and pinched. The cluster of VIPs now looked more like a jury. All eyes on them. Conversation stalled. One man actually took a step back from Zane like the stink of embarrassment might be contagious. Alyssa reached for Zane's arm. He said something to her. She pulled back. Her voice rose, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the crowd. "You told me she was your crazy ex. You didn't say anything about debt. About cheating. About—" Zane tried to talk over her, but it was no use. Too late. The fantasy was done. The carefully polished illusion she'd constructed, the radiant, liberated woman with her younger man, it was crumbling in front of people who mattered. People who judged. People who whispered. Natalie stepped beside me, drink in hand, gaze unflinching. "Let her feel it," she said, voice low. "Let her stand in it." Alyssa stormed toward the exit, heels snapping like gunfire. Zane hesitated, probably calculating whether it was better to follow or disappear. Then he went after her, but not before a snide laugh from one of the donors trailed behind him. Natalie and I watched the doors swing closed behind them. She turned to me. "Still want to thank her for noticing your flaws?" I smirked. "No. I want to thank her for setting me free." We clinked glasses. And I swear, in that moment, I saw something real spark in Natalie's eyes, something that had nothing to do with games, revenge, or performance. Just possibility. The ballroom had settled. No more whispers about Alyssa. No more sideways glances at Zane, who, last I heard, had quietly slipped out the service entrance behind her like a dog chased off a porch. Now, it was champagne time. The final toast of the evening. I hadn't expected to be part of it. I didn't come here for the spotlight. But somewhere between Natalie's whispered scalpel of truth and Alyssa's grand exit, the host of the gala, the same board member who'd earlier complimented my transformation, found me. "We'd love for you to give the closing toast," he'd said. "You clearly know how to command a room." Natalie nudged me gently. "Why not?" So here I was, standing at the podium, microphone in hand, champagne flute raised, a sea of faces staring back at me, some curious, some skeptical, a few still replaying the drama that had just unfolded like live theater in formal wear. I cleared my throat. "Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be part of tonight." I paused, eyes scanning the room, not searching for her anymore. No need. She was gone, and what she left behind didn't ache. It felt light. I was asked to say a few words to close the night, so I'll keep it brief. Nights like these are full of beauty, generosity, and connection. And sometimes, if we're lucky, they also remind us of something more. I looked toward Natalie. She stood near the back now, not hiding but watching, sipping from her glass with a calm that made her look untouchable. We all come into rooms like this with different stories. Some come to impress, some to escape, some looking for someone new, and some clinging to something they should have let go of long ago. I felt a pulse of electricity in the silence that followed. The crowd was listening now, really listening. I came tonight thinking I needed to prove something, that I needed to show someone what they lost. But what I found instead, I looked back at Natalie, eyes locking for just a beat longer than polite, was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful love doesn't come from those who knew the worst parts of you. It comes from the ones who recognize your best, even before you do. A soft murmur moved through the crowd. I smiled. So tonight, I raised my glass to something real. Not the filtered, staged, social media kind. I mean the real kind. The kind that sees your cracks and still chooses to shine through them. The kind that doesn't beg for attention, but commands respect. That builds, instead of breaks. I lifted my glass slightly higher. To letting go of illusions. To reclaiming your story. And to the people who remind us, sometimes, being broken isn't the end. It's the beginning of something better. Glasses lifted across the room. Soft clinks followed. Smiles. Nods. Applause broke out, not wild, but warm. Natalie was still watching me. But this time, there was something new in her eyes. Not mischief. Not strategy. Something quieter. Hope, maybe. Maybe even desire. Not the flash of revenge or sexual power play, but something slow-burning and earned. When I stepped down, she was already at the edge of the crowd, waiting. That was almost romantic, she teased, sliding her hand around my arm. I didn't plan to be. I know, she said. That's why it worked. We walked toward the exit together, past nods and congratulations, down the marble steps and out into the cool night air. The limo waited. She paused by the door, her hand still on my arm. "You're not the same man who walked into that ballroom," she said. I shrugged. "Neither are you." She smiled. "So where does that leave us?" I opened the door, gesturing for her to slide in first. And when she did, I followed. Not as a performance. Not as a man trying to win back a past. But as someone finally ready for whatever the hell came next. The sun rose slow and golden through half-open blinds, casting lines across the empty side of the bed. Alyssa reached out for me without thinking, habit, muscle memory, but touched only cold sheets. Her hand lingered there a moment longer than she expected it would. Then she sat up, blinking, disoriented. The house was too quiet. No sound of the shower running. No clink of coffee cups in the kitchen. No rustle of clothes being pulled from drawers with the day's rhythm already underway. Just silence. Her heels clicked across the hardwood as she stepped into the hallway, still wearing last night's makeup and a cocktail of shame and confusion. She passed the mirror and caught a glimpse of herself, smudged eyeliner, dry lips, the faint remnants of last night's arrogance now eroded by one simple truth. She'd lost. She walked into the bedroom and stopped. Her heart stuttered. The closet was half empty. The drawers too. And on the perfectly made bed, her bed, our bed, was a single envelope. No fancy stationery. Just my handwriting. "Alyssa, I won't compete for your attention. Not with your trainer. Not with your insecurities. Not with the mirror you've been flirting with more than me for the last 3 years. I wanted to be the man you admired. I tried to be the man you loved. But somewhere along the way, you stopped looking at me. And now? Now I'm done trying to be seen. Thank you for the wake-up call I didn't know I needed, for showing me who you really are, and for pushing me straight into the arms of someone who didn't just see me, she saw through me, and stayed. You never realized what you had, but she did. I've transferred the rest of the joint account to your name. The house is yours. The car, too. I took only what was mine. Everything else you already threw away. Ryan. P.S. The man you saw last night? That's who I am now. And he's never coming back. She stood there in the middle of the bedroom, holding the letter with both hands like it might tear her open if she let go. She sat on the edge of the bed, not crying, not screaming, just processing. It hit her slowly, like cold water seeping through cracks in the dam. She'd played a game. She'd pushed me. She thought she had control, and I let her believe it. Until I didn't. Outside, a sleek black SUV idled at the curb. Inside, Natalie sat behind the wheel, sunglasses on, lips parted in that way they always were when she was thinking. I opened the passenger door and slid in. She glanced at me once. You okay? She asked. I nodded. I will be. You leave the note? On the bed. Dramatic. Necessary. She shifted into drive and pulled away from the curb. The city rolled by around us, buildings, coffee shops, dog walkers, and joggers all blurred together in a quiet hum. I didn't look back. Not once. Natalie reached over, fingers brushing mine. Not with heat. Not with fire. With something gentler. The kind of touch that doesn't demand anything. Just promises presence. I didn't know what would happen next. We hadn't defined anything. Hadn't mapped the future. But I knew this. Whatever came after Alyssa, whatever came after that marriage, that pain, that humiliation, it wasn't going to be a step backward. It was forward. It was mine.